Hi, so welcome back to the RBI Asia Trailblazer Summit 2020. I'm Evie Rusman, a reporter for Retail Banker International. In today's panel, we will be discussing the revolutionary impact of digital transformation on banking operations. And today I am joined by Alvin Lim, Head of Digital Singapore and Head of Open Banking Engagement at HSBC, and Lim Yeong, Director of Enterprise Banking at Affin Bank. Within Alvin's role at HSBC, he supports HSBC key markets striving towards open banking aspirations, covering both the regulatory and commercial opportunities leveraging the open API framework locally. And Lim joined Affin Bank in 2016 with the responsibility to develop and implement strategies that drive the growth of the division for the bank. He brings with him more than 26 years of experience in banking and finance, primarily in commercial and SME business at both local and foreign banks. Okay, so now moving on to the discussion. Just a note to say, if any audience members would like to submit questions for any of our panelists, please do so through the chat box feature, and I will go through these at the end of the discussion. So the first point is the idea that digital banking is part of an omni-channel experience. So we are currently in a climate where consumer attitudes are changing rapidly, with many wanting multiple ways to access their bank accounts. So just a question for you both. Are banks now being pressured to leave the non-digitally native behind in their fight to stay ahead of technological development?
Alvin?
Alvin, do you want to take that one?
All right, sure. Happy to do so. So I think in terms of on that point, the native bank is definitely not be left behind, because if you were to look into how the banks are actually transforming ourselves, as in going back to the point of how do we create an experience that's consistent to for the customers across different channels, right? So if you look at it, right now, a lot of technologies that we are as a native banks is, or rather we call it incumbent banks, is rolling out to the market. A lot of all this is really central around creating a great customer experience for the customers, right? So, for example, in HSBC, there are a number of new experience that we are rolling out to the customers and start to also learn and co-creating the journey with them as well. So one of the new journey that we have, we are pretty proud of it and have just recently rolled out, is actually is a full digital onboarding for our credit card customers. The application process is actually a straight through and is end-to-end using the Singapore national identity. And upon instant approval, the customer actually logs in directly to the mobile banking to activate their credit card, and they can start to provision into the Apple Pay and begin using it, right? Or they can even do online shopping instantly. So if you look at it from the end-to-end perspective, yes, the native bank, or we still call it the native bank, is actually we are using a lot or leveraging a lot of these new technologies and across different channels, across different even digital channel itself to support our customers, right? So just by this journey that I described, the customer has actually gone through multiple digital journeys, right? So for example, they started from a HSBC app to apply for the credit card, and they got it approved and instantly and can use it and provision into Apple Pay itself. That immediately is something that is familiar for them to use and to start to pay, perhaps for the first cup of coffee, right? And they can use the same credential to start their online shopping, perhaps on another app as well. So if you look at it in a way from a customer experience perspective, we continue to learn what is important to the customers, and we continue to co-create what are the journeys that they are looking for, and also in a way starting to understand what are important to them and how might we help them even more, right? So this is very much central for us to create the experience that delights our customers.
Lim, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, interestingly, what Alvin said is, I think, all correct. for the matter, back to your point just now, your question whether the native bank is being pressured to do such things. I mean, in some way, I'll probably say I think we have to do it faster. Somehow or other, this pandemic itself has made digital indispensable. So it's like everybody had got to move in. I mean, in some way, I think most banks are moving into digital, but somehow or other, this pandemic has make it everyone has to move faster, significantly faster for that matter, just to somehow or other prevent, for that matter, prepare ourselves for the next one, the next one, the next one. I mean, Affin is a local bank, so we ourselves are doing a couple of things digitally. The notable rollouts will be coming online on board over the next couple of months. In fact, for a country as Malaysia as a whole, we are slightly behind digitally speaking. But I think some banks already started to roll out. I mean, some of the local banks started to roll out very interesting things. In fact, the KYC in terms of using national registration is something already on our card and to be rolled out very soon. As a bank, of course, my business, or for that matter, our business itself includes enterprise banking, which covers an app called Colony. It is part and parcel of the digital process to be used fully to onboard customers. But to your point, Evie, I think it's no doubt about it. Going digital is a foregone conclusion. It is a must. It's not about if. I think it's about when. The faster is the better. I mean, in some way, not just banks, all commercial entities and not all government entities, for that matter, digital is a way. Look at the way we do our summit today.
Every aspect of life.
Right. So I think it's not about if or not. It's about when and how much you can spend on it, and how creative we can be in getting things done faster, more seamlessly, and to Alvin's point, more customer inclusive in many sense.
So looking at the pandemic, on a general note, how well do you think the industry has adapted to the pressure for digital services?
Well, I can let me start this a bit. I think as a banking industry as a whole, you will look at it globally speaking, there are lots of ideas came up. And with this pandemic, it's interesting to see that things are hastened significantly more. Nobody could have thought you can onboard a customer totally, not seeing a customer face to face, physically speaking. It is now being done. For that matter, in our country itself, we have lots of e-wallet and all these things, everything done through digital onboarding, and the bankers are coming in to complete the onboarding for bigger accounts or bigger balances. I think whether you use a wallet to pay, which is the wallet linked to a bank account, or whether it is investing in stock markets, or for that matter, doing some transaction over your internet banking, or for that matter, apply a loan, get it disbursed. I think that is very common, perhaps examples from China. It has been done very well. Within minutes, money can go into your account. I think as a whole, my view has adapted well, and certainly there's no end to it. There are more things can be done. I'm quite sure one day you and I won't be meeting each other for a long time. We can still get transaction done or get banking relationship set up. This is how interesting. We have never thought of it 20 years or 25 years ago when we started banking. I think this is amazing. In some way, it's rather unfortunate, of course, this pandemic happened, but it has also made humankind be creative in many other ways, especially bankers who has been associated most of the time as being backward, traditional, overly conservative, this kind of thing. Especially when the word you use, native banks, oh my goodness, the word native itself is already an interesting word to be associated with. That's my view, but I suppose it can be significantly be done more. And naturally, we look forward to, I think in another 6 months' time, another revolution will come in a very different way. I'm quite sure even our own local bank itself, we ourselves are doing a few things to be rolled out over the next couple of months. Evie?
Yeah, it's really changed the way people work, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah. Adding on to Yeong's point, I think one is on the aspect of the customers. The customers definitely has changed in terms of the way how they would like the bank to be and or doing banking transactions. Within HSBC itself, we are talking about, besides the customers changes from experience perspective, it's also the way that we operate, right? We have never thought that we can get through something in such a short time. Right. So during this pandemic, a lot of things that we thought is not possible, right? Take as simple as working from home, right? The culture of working from home may not exist in all the markets, right? That we may not be comfortable with it. But because of this pandemic, because of the current restriction, we are all starting to work from home. And the point about working from home, the productivity is to continue to be the same, if it's not more. So I think the way of us operating from us as an employee has changed, and going further than that, for example, right? So sometimes we do say, let's debate on certain policy changes or risk changes or process changes, and it would take time to do that debate, to do the assessment. But because of the current situation itself, it actually compresses the time to almost near zero. This is important, and we need to help the customer. This is the situation. Let's do it. And we managed to actually shift a lot of all this, the time compressed to really down to zero, right? And down to, even, especially for us, HSBC, we have colleagues that spread all over the world, right? In the current situation, we always feel that, hey, we need to be physically in one location to get something done. And during this period, we are really proud of our engineers and developers that sits, say, in India, in China. They all have to work from home, and they may not be equipped, right? And in some of the places, we even fly the laptop to them so they can start to continue to work from home and continue to develop solutions for us and start to roll out, right? Just in the last 6-8 months, we rolled out more than 30 new features and journeys to our customers. In the past, even getting 1 or 2 or 3 may be taking some time, right? But because of the current situation, it really helped us to think creatively, to operate a lot more efficient in terms of the entire spectrum of it, not just certain. So therefore, it's the customers and the consumer has changed, and it is also within the bank itself, we start to operate differently. And like what Yeong said, the interesting bit is the next 6-12 months, how this become normal in terms of for the bank. Right, we just talk about, yes, it's new, but not sure what is the normal yet. It will take some time for us to understand what is that normal. Right.
In fact, I just want to add on what Alvin had mentioned. The word efficiency has become synonymous to what we are doing right now. You probably figured out of the 10 meetings in the past, because of this pandemic, everything go virtual, work from home. Somehow or other, 7 out of the 10 meetings you don't actually need it, but still can get it done. So you don't need to physically be around to get certain things done, which add on to the efficiency, compressing the timeline to virtually nil and zero. That's really interesting. And then, of course, the other side of it, from the customer point of view, is actually a double-edged sword. So anything you've done wrong, everything will be digitally transmitted all over the world within a pretty short time. So that is from customer feedback point of view. So it is really, really interesting. So I can't wait for the next 6 to 12 months. What will evolve and come along for this banking industries.
Alvin, you mentioned how like the needs of the customer is changing. Is this across all demographics, or is it purely a generational thing, the demand for digital services?
It's actually across all demographic, right? So because if you were to look into it, the demographic itself, from a younger working professional to the more mature in terms of starting to do a family planning or having an internationally minded where they want to start to look into international. So across the spectrum, definitely there would be a change. And the change itself is because of the needs and also the experience that they're going through are changing as well. So gone are the days, for example, as simple as the fundamental of it, we use a fax machine to do something, right? To an email. But right now, it is not. It's all within a virtual meeting like us. It's just like one click, we are actually connected, right? So because of all these fundamental changes, therefore, it is actually across demographic, there will be a change as well. So, but of course, if we were to look into vertically, each of the needs may be slightly different. Fundamentally, the services will be, yes, everyone wants something that is faster and simpler. That's for sure, right? But across each of the demographic, they will have a specific needs, and how are we addressing each of the specific needs, right? So yes, they are changing, but also in terms of shifting deeper in terms of each of the segments.
Okay, so with digital transformation, open banking is a big topic of discussion, and the idea of banks collaborating with fintechs. So Lim, what are the biggest challenges of this type of relationship?
Interestingly, both of us also Lim. Okay. Right. Okay. In terms of working with fintech or so-called challenges, whether they are actually a challenge or a complement, I think we still need to debate, or whether it is the banking things of the future. So going forward, whether if conventional bank or native banks or incumbent bank itself will transform to become a more like a fintech, I probably think it may. Okay, so it will become more or less a hybrid of both going forward. For naturally for the banks itself, incumbent bank itself to move forward digitally in this entirety, it will take time and as well as efforts. I suppose in some way, when you have the resources and you have the connection, and as well as the ability to work with the fintech, whether locally or globally, that makes things smoother significantly. In fact, every day I will be receiving emails and from proper proposals from entities all over the world, proposing this can be done with a bank, to your bank, collectively with your bank. So it's not actually a local event anymore. So I don't see it as a challenge, or for that matter as a challenge. It's like going forward, we have to live with it. It is part and parcel of life. The bank will be a fintech, or fintech will be a bank. So either way, it really depends how you put it. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Alvin, do you have anything on that as well?
Sure, happy to add on. So I think going back to the question in terms of digital transformation, it is really, broadly speaking, is about future-proofing a business, right? It entails a degree of change of business processes and operating models as well. So at times when we talk about even fundamental changes in how the business model generates revenue and manages costs as well, because that's the biggest thing that we in the bank always look into. But moving to apply this in the context of open banking and working closely with fintechs. So I'd like to highlight one of the examples that we work with fintechs, right? So this is an example specifically related to business process change we built for the UK market and working with the fintech and to support some of the more vulnerable customer impacted by the current economy. And what we do is through the open banking, we offer a simple digital solution, which we just aptly name it income and expenditure. So this is what it is actually a feature where it connected through the open banking to aggregate the customer information across all their other banking relationship. And with those information that's aggregated, then what we would do is we can build a personalized financial plan to support the customers, right? And how we can advise them digitally without them needing to prepare papers or visiting a branch and to have the face-to-face conversation anymore, right? And this specifically built with the fintechs, right? So otherwise, it would be the speed to market is very important with this, right? And back to here and what mentioned in terms of really working with them. So even within HSBC itself, we have once every 2 weeks invite all the fintechs to share and present their use cases to us. What are the solutions that they have? What are the view of the world? What are the view of their customers? And for us to learn what are the solutions that they have, how can we collaborate? How do we build some test cases? And how can we then use that solution to build into our core journey to support our customers? So this is something that we have been ongoing doing it.
Do you think there are any issues when it comes to data sharing within these partnerships? I know customers are are very concerned as to where their data is going. So how can banks ensure that customer data is secure when dealing with multiple parties?
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, what do you think? Okay. This is your forte.
Yeah, sure. really good question. Very good question. I think a couple of things around. Yes, a couple of things of it is I think what is more important when we talk about data sharing, at the end of it, the lowest denominator is really about the consent. So from a customer perspective, how do we manage the customer consent first, right? Without the consent, there will not be a data sharing. That is for sure, right? So the key component about it is how do we have the consent from the customer and for the purpose of us using the data. So there's a lot of transparency, which is the next, right? So by showing them in terms of this is how we are using your data and this is how we are presenting the data for you, and this is how we are sharing the data or not sharing the data. So the transparency policy is very critical. The third is basically from a customer perspective, they must be able to see a value exchange, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, I am happy, I'm consenting the data to you, I'm happy to share the data with you, and you are being transparent to me, but what is the value in exchange to that? So therefore, in terms of these three, when we put together, it is very key critical in terms of using the customer information and how we can support the customer better. So this is very key to it. And of course, the context will be very different when we talk about from open banking lens, which we can be other question later. Yeong, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, I just want to add on 2 points. Very well put. The consent being the primary, the most fundamental of all. I think beyond that is about how do you manage the consent. It's not easy. I think the challenge is somehow or other maybe when halfway through the customer withdraw the consent, there will be another challenge to how you're going to manage the consent, whether the data is already halfway out or you have to put it back. All these things are interesting. I think from the open banking point of view, in fact, from digital point of view, I think partly the question Evie you asked probably you relate to is perhaps the safety part of it. When even with consent gotten is how you secure that, especially now when people are going to cloud and all these things. I mean, some jurisdiction is still required data to be on site. There is some challenges there, but going forward, I think going to cloud, I think it's a foregone conclusion. It's matter how you secure that properly, and what is the safety issue out of it, and how do you go to so-called where is the remediation action when things get leaked out or things get compromised.
Oh, is it frozen?
But
we're back.
yeah. And maturity of all sorts of infrastructure to make that, including the legal and jurisdiction system. I think all these are encompassing in one big topic as far as I think suppose what Alvin partly you have mentioned, and to add on what Alvin has been talking about it's a very big topic lah. So the evolvement of this data safety and data usage and consent over the next 24 months and also will be very interesting. It has to be like click a button, how do you withdraw consent, this kind of thing. Well, anyway, it is interesting to see how things move forward. It's inevitable. Consent, the data will be available online. It's how you use it.
Yeah.
Just a small point to add on Yeong in terms of the education or the awareness to the customer. This is one of the probably the single most important thing, right? While we can be having a proper consent management in place and transparency and the policy in place, but the entire education bit is very important to the customer so that they understood, right, how the bank is actually protecting their data, what are the things that we are doing, and so on. So this is something that we internally in HSBC, we call it HSBC Safeguard. There's a section in our public website that we are dedicated this to all the things that customer need to know in terms of as simple as what is cybersecurity, right? I mean, among us, we know and can define and speak well about it. But for a man on the street, what does that even mean? Right? What does that even mean, and how might that impact me? Right? And if I talk about make sure you set a password that is like 8 using alphanumerical and symbol. I don't know. I might be setting it as 1, 2, 3, right, or ABC. So I think a lot of all this require. Yes, we within the banks we might be thinking hey, it's a big knowledge, but it is not. When we are talking about, for example, we manage millions of customers, we need to make sure that the customer understood what are the standard of security that they themselves have to be aware of, and they themselves have to basically try to achieve it as much as possible as well. So this is a section and a continuous education that we share with the customers to make sure they're comfortable with it. Because technology does take time to land, and especially when we talk about demographic that is slightly more matured. We used to be like calling each other. For example, I used to call my mom, but right now it's not. We are using WhatsApp, and more than that, we start to use FaceTime. And I never knew that she would be able. I never knew that she would be able to use a tablet, right, an iPad. But right now, she knows everything about it. So, so it's just like it's through the entire education and awareness that they will become more comfortable to it, right?
So just moving on from that, there is a lot of speculation about technologies such as like AI and blockchain coming into the forefront within the next year or so. Which technologies do you both think are worth investing in?
I mean, in my view, all these are worthy technology to look at. Seriously, you never know what will happen down the road. Whether it's 6, 12, or 12 years, we don't even know. But most definitely, I think the one moving very, very fast is definitely AI. It's part and parcel of will be part and parcel of life going forward. We're talking about AI, robotic things being deployed at banking lobbies, and for the matter, using it for decisioning in terms of some credit matters. This is just a surface of AI. I suppose in due course, we'll be talking to machines more than human. To get things done. You find yourself very funny way talking to a metal, but things there. But whether it's worthwhile to invest, it depends really on industries, whether it's relevance. And I think in the banking world, I think AI is a must in some way. Naturally, blockchain is something I think it's still quite new in some part of the world. Blockchain, for that matter, some jurisdiction may even ban it. In how you look at it. But it's something worthy to at least explore, going to be slightly deeper. I think some banking institutions go to the extent that I use it to do for data transmission, or for that matter for storing of sensitive data. I think this is also worthy to be discussed, to be explored. Having said that, you never know. Sometime down the road, there's some of the new things come out replacing both. You can solve all these so-called different technology kind of needs. So to your question, it's simple. All these are worthy to be explored. In some way, if it's not now, it has to be parked on the parking lot somewhere to be taken out to be discussed. Most definitely, immediately, AI is something. It is a must go by all standards.
Yeah, so I think we're echoing what Yeong said. The short answer is actually all of them, right? So and there was a speaker earlier mentioned about the unit cost of the technology is actually coming down significantly compared to a decade or two ago. So therefore, the cost of investing and even exploring new technology should actually outweigh in terms of the entire investment itself, right? So in HSBC, we're using many of these technologies, right? And it's really to unlock a deeper understanding. The core objective is really to unlock the deeper understanding of our customers and how we can help them even better, right? So we have already seen a massive in terms of customer shift, right? And right now, close to 90% of our transactions actually happening on digital, right? And therefore, there's a lot of data, a lot of interaction that's happening, right? So, and across all the platforms, right? So with all this technology and with all this data that put together, we are now able to get to know our customer better, right? So before this, it is just impossible. Like what Yeong was saying, that it's impossible for me as a person to look through a different profile to truly understand a customers and be able to help and support them in what we call the personalization, right? So we move on from really personalization to hyper personalized and continue personalization, because it's not about a snapshot of that time that I understood the customer, because the customer behavior changes over time. The need will change over time. So how do we actually utilize the data to really understand the customers, right? And by using this AI and machine learning on this data, we start to be able to look into the signals and the changes of such behaviors, right? So this is what we are doing quite a fair bit in terms of shifting our relationship from an isolated type of interaction with our customers to a world where we always listen and we always learn and always help them.
Okay, great. So moving back to fintech and banking partnerships, what do you think makes a successful partnership? What are the key characteristics in that? Yeong, yeah,
sure.
Go for it.
Sure, no problem. I think at the end of the day, the partnership, the definition of a success in a partnership is really we used to call a win-win, but right now there is actually the third win as well, which is the arguably more important win, right? So it's a win-win-win. So what does that mean, right? The win is not just the bank and the partner that we work with. The third win is actually the customers. At the end of the day, the customer is the one that will be ultimately say whether it is a successful partnership or not. It is a successful propositions and offers or anything that you are bringing to the market. So that is key importance to that. But coming back to, let's just stay for a moment in terms of the partnership to be successful, right? So a lot of times in terms of like specific to use of technology, there's always, especially for us in the incumbent banks, there's quite a fair bit of technology today that we are still pretty much like using the word that you mentioned, Evie, is more of like still native, still an old technology, but we are constantly refreshing the technology platform itself, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, for the partnership to be successful, the partners usually are starting from a white paper. So therefore, the technology they're adopting is a lot simpler, or we call it the lightweight. So the question is then, as we integrate this technology, how do we actually manage it, not just for here and now, meaning the 1 or 2, 3 years, is actually a continuity for many, many more years to grow, right? So, for example, just using an AI, it's just not about one model or a set of algorithms. It's an algorithm that will continue to expand. And how do we actually start to expand to use it as well, right? So Yeong mentioned about the use of the cloud technology as well. So it is not just here and now, but how do we actually determine and build a roadmap or a runway that continue to scale with the bank, scale with the technology, and scale with the customer need as well.
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting set of questions, or for that matter, comments. Is it those days where we do partnership is about how do you do something and get it done, and how do you do it bigger and bigger and bigger and more. Now you do things is digitally, how you get it small, get it fast, get it sharp, and how you use the same thing, do it more, and then faster. Wow, I mean, it is a truly remarkable change. My goodness, we're getting age in this in some way, comparing to 10, 15 years ago. But to the point of partnership, it's a matter of a win-win or win-win-win, whichever way it is. Whether it's B2B, those days we heard about B2B, then B2C, then C2C, then B2C, all sorts of funny things, then B2B, B2C, all sorts of funny quote-unquote development going forward, and which makes the so-called partnership indispensable in some way. This has been done in partnership way, whether you call it ecosystems, whether you call it a true work together in terms of getting things done. I mean, this I can relate to the app we have developed for the SMEs, which we do a tripartite partners with the third-party merchants, with us as a bank intermediary, and with the consumer at the end. So towards the end, it encompasses B2B, B2B2C, and all these things. But to Alvin's point, whether it is going to be a win-win-win, or it's going to be short-term, or it's going to be a win-win-win, or lose first, then only win-win-win, that is another question. Typically, investment in technology will require some sort of upfront, you probably don't want to look at it, the numbers first, and then moving on to it to be more efficient, more profitable, and somehow or other you got to monetize it. I mean, to date, we all know a certain very techy company is still reporting losses, quote unquote, financially speaking. But their market cap is in billions, in trillions, perhaps. That is where how partnerships come about in terms of making it profitable, making it a double win, and as well as the end user who to it is really meaningful to really want this partnership in that sense. To us bankers, we find it useful is one thing. To the end user, that is more important. That the customer experience has to come in, whether it's really useful to them, whether it's really relevant to them. That's where the end-to-end kind of understanding, whether the banks would like to appreciate more for what the market has and how do we capitalize and monetize it for everybody's gain, including the end user. Well, it's a big long topic. Probably can take us another 20 years to finish.
Yeah.
But very interestingly, just to add one small point to it, since we are talking under the umbrella of digital banking, right? So because of the use of the technology and the partnership between the bank and the partners that we're working with is a lot more efficient nowadays, right? Efficient in a way of integrating a seamless solutions. So for example, I spoke about the UK example under the open banking called income and expenditure, right? So this was actually built in a very short time, right? And that's because from a technology perspective, it's a lot easier to integrate. And we can only expand there more, right? So because right now with such a digital technology that is enabled, it is all about from a customer perspective. Gone are the days that I go into my bank just to do a banking transactions. It's actually most often banking is actually can do a lot more value for our customers by also helping and assisting them and supporting them in their other needs as well. So for example, it's just I want to buy an airline ticket, right? So how my bank actually helps me to do that even better, right? And so on and so forth, right? It's no longer the day that where I just check in which airline has an offer or which hotel that I have offered because I have a credit card with that bank, right? So it's a lot more seamless in the experience, and that's where we can actually be developing towards, just because we are all now moving or already most of us on the digital banking platforms, right? So therefore, in terms of the partnership, it's actually very different in terms of like compared to how the old model of a partnership is to the new generation when we talk about the digital banks.
You're right, Alvin. You're right. This is really the relevancy of the partnerships has to be your example. The airline tickets going through a banking portal or banking channel. That says it all. So everything itself has to be relevant, and then the partners itself really is a kind of win-win kind of situation where it's like a one-stop platform for everybody. Whichever you go, whether it's banks or the airlines itself, everything is integrated and it can be done significantly faster, shorter, and more meaningful.
I think we may have to leave it there, as I know there's another session starting in a couple of minutes. I'd just like to thank you both so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you again. So now for our audience members, they can make their way to stage 2 to hear Olivier Berthier, CEO and co-founder of MoneyThor, give the next presentation on the use of data to develop proactive customer management. But yeah, thank you both again for joining.
Thank you, Evie.
Thank you, Evie.
Thanks, Evie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.